Hi, this is DrClyde, and this is our first of 6 steps on optimizing your sports nutrition. So we just went through our introduction on these 6 steps. The first is just this general concept that every critical piece needed in our system we need to take care of so that the components that make us up for our healing and our fitness as the driving force behind our performance are taken care of. So in this image of a sports car being taken care of by a crew, you could imagine one critical piece being forgotten, like one of the tires has an issue and they didn't notice it, or there's an issue within the engine, or like I put a circle on here to kind of highlight, maybe they forgot to add enough fuel for the next go around. And so the car will be limited by whatever critical component that is being neglected, whether that's by accident or intentionally trying to neglect that, because athletic individuals will oftentimes underfuel their bodies in an effort to get lean. And so that is an intentional restriction of either calories, carbohydrates, fats, whatever it is that the athlete is thinking that they have to deplete so that they can get lean for a higher power to weight ratio. It is fairly common in athletics and to optimize performance to try to have as much power at the lowest weight possible. So as an example of that, in this review of overtraining symptoms, almost all documented overtraining is caused by undernutrition. And in every study that looks at carbohydrate intake, it tends to be low carbohydrate intake, not just low caloric intake. Now, of course, you can become overtrained if you're low in protein or if you're dehydrated, but the most common mistake nutritionally that leads to overtraining syndrome is undernutrition, specifically eating on average half as much carbohydrate than athletes who are not experiencing overtraining syndrome. And so really, overtraining is a misnomer. It's really undernutrition as the driving force behind underhealing that is leading to the symptoms of overtraining, or in the short term, overreaching, which then doesn't just reduce performance, but also reduces health. So in this 2017 Journal of Applied Physiology paper, where I've highlighted the title and the authors on top, the main point of this is that refueling with glucose on the order of 1 gram per kilogram body weight soon after exercise kickstarts the recovery process. And until that occurs, where the fuel is back up in your muscles, the healing process cannot be optimized. So in the first hour after exercise, the uptake rate into muscle is highest, but for the first 3-4 hours, it's still relatively high. After that, the absorption rate into muscle is a little less, and you therefore have to have more insulin to get that fuel in, which then sends it everywhere, including body fat. So if your power to weight ratio or your leanness, while maintaining high levels of health and fitness, are important, then the refuel has to happen earlier, where you're less dependent on insulin. In particular, in the first 10, 20, 30 minutes after exercise, insulin release, at least in the very first part of that, is relatively suppressed by the presence of adrenaline, but that has a very short half-life in the bloodstream. But muscle is absorbing glucose at a very high rate because of depletion from a high-intensity workout. And so there's 2 things that make muscle absorb glucose. One is insulin when you're at rest, and the other is just high-intensity muscle contraction. And that absorption rate will fall off exponentially with a half time of 15 to 30 minutes, or at the very most 1 hour. So there's different phases of the kinetics, and so it depends on what aspect of the mechanism, but it's thought currently that the main mechanism that's driving glucose uptake is the depletion of adenosine triphosphate, the main fuel molecule, all the way down to adenosine monophosphate, which then activates adenosine monophosphate kinase, and AMPK is thought to be a prime driving force behind glucose transporters coming to the surface of muscle fibers during exercise. So a workout that's, let's say 600 calories, and it's relatively high intensity, 300 or 400 calories of that could be glycogen or glucose stores within muscle. And you don't have to recover all of that, but the most heavily used muscle fibers if a muscle belly, let's say your quadriceps, hamstrings, and glutes from running or cycling are depleted, there's going to be muscle fibers in there that are the most heavily used that are depleted by more than 80%. So when you're depleting the sugar stores in a muscle belly in your main agonists, the main muscles you're using for your movement, by half, there are some of those fibers that have almost nothing left. And those are the ones that won't heal as fast and won't be there for you in your next workout unless you refuel them. And so it really can't be overstated the importance of refueling intense workouts, even moderately intense workouts, so that your most heavily used muscle fibers are there for you in the next workout, because they're enabled to heal and they'll contribute to the power profile of your movement. Because if they're not contributing to the power as much of your movement, then in subsequent workouts, your main muscles that are fatiguing sooner because they're under refueled will not contribute as much to force. So other muscle groups will contribute more to your movement. So you'll start running, swimming, cycling with a different biomechanics. And when forces are different across a joint, that's where you're increasing sports injury risk. And so here are a few examples of many published in the last few years that show that fatigue in muscles changes our biomechanics and dramatically increases sports injury risk. So when you are refueling your muscles, you're not just triggering an increase in protein production because it accelerates ATP production to fuel the process of amino acid assembly, but it is also contributing to those muscle fibers recovering their fuel so that they can contribute equally with the rest of your muscles in power production to maintain normal biomechanics in your subsequent workouts to reduce sports injury risk. So it isn't just that the refuel in muscle gives you enough fuel to drive protein production. Turns out our muscles are much smarter than that because of signaling to the DNA, if you want to think of that as kind of a central brain. Our DNA is told by two competing transcription factors, molecules that tell your DNA how to respond to exercise, on how it should respond to that exercise. The depletion of ATP, generating AMP, activating adenosine monophosphate kinase, that triggers gene expression to increase the machinery for fat burning. So if you don't refuel your muscles, you increase the machinery for fat burning. And you would think, well, okay, now that's great. I want to get leaner, so let's not refuel because we want to max out on that. However, when you maximally activate adenosine monophosphate kinase for fat burning, it deactivates the mechanistic target of rapamycin. That's the new term, used to be the mammalian target of rapamycin, so mTOR, which drives gene expression for healing. So what happens if you maximize fat burning to the point where you're suppressing the healing response? Well, this paper published in Cell Metabolism shows just how catastrophic that is. So a part of the study that I'm not showing here was done with trained athletic individuals. But the part that was done with novices is the graph that you're looking at here that they presented. And this is freely available online to the public, this paper, if you're wanting to look at the whole study. And they show here how sugar use and fat use in mitochondria, together with performance, go up each week as they train more and more and more. But in the third week, where they're doing these high-intensity sprints to a greater extent that they can heal from, so that their tissue isn't healing, the sugar use and fat use in their muscles drops to less than before they started exercising, when they were completely unfit and not doing any exercise at all. So it is not true that exercise burns more fat and sugar in your body to make you healthier. It's not true. What is true is that healing your muscles in response to exercise increases the use of sugar and fats. So if you're exercising really hard and you're struggling to lose weight, it could very easily be that you're not providing enough nourishment or not sleeping well enough, or your stress is too high. There's something in your metabolic flow that is taking away from the healing of your muscles so that it can't give you the result that you're doing all of that work for. In this 2013 Nature paper, they show that ketosis, where you don't need that much carbohydrate, is driven by low fuel levels in the liver. And I put on here a few references that show that when you refuel a workout right after the workout, that you do not have sugars going back into the liver or generating a large insulin response because muscle's absorbing it quickly in that first 10 to 30 minutes. So you can go as high as 50 grams of carbohydrate, 200 calories. That's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a granola bar without coming out of ketosis. So anyone who tries to argue with you that, well, you're doing ketosis for weight loss, why would you do a workout and then eat a carbohydrate afterwards? It's because it refuels your muscle so that you don't have a chronically low blood sugar that triggers your brain to use your muscle as a nutrient resource, where you're losing lean tissue instead of healing it. And by doing that, you still don't come out of ketosis. So you refuel right away after your exercise, and then you can go to your low carbohydrate meals if you want. But if you don't refuel and do low carbohydrate meals, then it's going to be very challenging to heal from even moderately high intensity exercise. Okay, so how much carbohydrate would we need to refuel? Well, that depends on the intensity. So I put here on this chart relative intensities that you could maintain for longer than an hour, or roughly 1 hour, or closer to only 10 minutes, or 1 to 3 minutes, or strength training, which is generally bursts that are lasting, brief moments like plyometrics, weights, bands, things where there's added resistance. And as you get to shorter and shorter time sequences of intensity, the peak intensity goes up, and the relative amount of fats goes down as the relative amount of sugars goes up. Now, the cardiovascular maximal benefit is with low intensity done for greater than an hour, but the threshold, whether it's ventilatory, lactate, anaerobic threshold, it goes by different names. So, and this is triggered by the fight or flight system in our body. So I think of it as an autonomic threshold. That's about your 1 hour intensity. Your 10-minute maximum or 10 to 12-minute maximum is the maximum total caloric per minute burning rate of fats. This is your maximum volumetric flow rate of oxygen, and that flow and use of oxygen, which means that's where you're burning the most fats. When you get to 1 to 3 minute efforts, this is where you're depleting adenosine triphosphate the fastest, which then activates adenosine monophosphate kinase the most for the highest fat burning over the next several days in response to that workout. So there's this irony that high intensity training, where you're doing bursts of 1 to 3 minutes of some cardio movement, doesn't burn very much fats at all during the workout itself, but maximizes your fat burning after that workout as an adaptive response. And strength training, of course, is mainly sugar use. So that brings us to step 2 in the next video.